It was a rainy dusk. The whole Eden district of Pernath town was faded under the gloom of rain. The black sheath of David resembled the shadow of the sky as he strolled on the street. David was an adolescent living alone in a one-room apartment, which he could barely afford. He was working in a private firm which granted him a less salary. That very evening, David was hastily walking as it was raining extremely. It was 8 at night. David stepped into a store at the corner of the street. It was a legal store and was about to get closed just when David entered. "Can I have a cigarette, please?" asked David, looking graspingly at Steve, the shopkeeper. "Sure, but it's my closing time now." "Come the next day," answered Steve in an oblivious manner, "but I want only one. It's already raining since morning and most of the stores are closed nearby. I can beg you for this if you want me to." David was needy for that cigarette. Steve was in a hurry to close his store as it was raining endlessly. Unwillingly, Steve offered a cigarette to David. "Here you go." David took the cigarette in his hand and looked for a lighter in his pockets. He could not get that. Now, Steve was stepping out of the store just then. David uttered, "Do you keep a lighter with you?" Steve was annoyed at this and answered, "You asked me for a cigarette and you don't keep a lighter with you." "Strange." Steve provided David with the lighter. Just when the lighter blew up, the rain went more sense, it seems. "The rain is long-lasting. We shall wait here for some time. What do you think, mister? What's your name, by the way?" Steve looked at David in a displeased way. "I'm Steve," replied Steve, sitting on a bench inside the store. It was David who made Steve to wait unwillingly, uselessly. David also entered. Without any allowance, both of them were seated on the same bench. The whole town was being showered by a torrent of rain. The cigarette was fuming the atmosphere. "Can I find a place to hang up my sheath? It's wet," David asked. Steve pointed at a hanger which was at the backside of the door. It was midnight. David started to slumber, lying on the bench sitting beside. Steve was annoyed as he was burdened with this untimely night, and that too because of the one beside him. The night passed anyhow. It rained the whole night. Steve was awake for the night while David had a good slumber. "Get up, young man, you had a good time here." Steve poked David with a stick. David got up in a sluggish manner and looked out. "Oh God, what's the time?" "7, Mr. David," Steve said. David stood up hastily and took up his sheath. It was Monday and he had to go to his workplace earlier, so he fixed up himself and was stepping out of the store. Steve opened the door and let him leave. As he was leaving, a harsh voice stopped him. "You have to pay me, David." David turned around and it was Steve. David gave a smile and said, "Pay for what?" "For that one cigarette. It was worth 5 penny." "What? 5, but it costs only 3, David said. "Time is more precious, sir. You took my whole night uselessly, and that one night costs a penny. Isn't it weird?" David was already in a hurry, but Steve was stubborn at his point. He kept on arguing for some time and agreed to take 3 penny for the cigarette only. David also agreed to pay him the money. He looked into his pockets but was not able to get anything out of it. David was out of pocket that time. He told this to Steve. "Then why did you ask for a favor when you're not having anything to pay for it? What if I do this to you?" David looked Steve for amnesty, but Steve kept on humiliating David. At last, David concluded, "Okay, listen, right now I have to go to my workplace. While returning in the evening, I shall give you your money for sure. Calm down." Steve looked at David with anger. David managed to leave anyhow and reached at his apartment. It was 8 now. His room was miserable and he attired himself in a well manner and moved out. He wasn't having anything to take in his breakfast, not even a single penny. David reached his office. There he was given a reward for his good work. The reward was a rose, given by his manager. "David, I offer you this rose as your next month's salary. It's a magical rose blessed with certain powers that would make you richer day by day. You should be glad to take it. Wherever you go, this rose will provide you wealth," the manager said to David. In the dusk, David with blushes on his face moved out from office, taking the reward with pride. David was delighted. He was thinking about the next month, which would be spent with great comfort. As he was walking on the street in front of his apartment, he was interrupted by a voice. "Hey you, young man David." It was Steve. David turned around and Steve's furious face made him remember the last night. No sooner has David started with his words, Steve uttered, "I want my money you promised me to give in the evening. May I have it?" David was speechless. He could not think what to do. All he was having was that precious rose. Steve kept on criticizing David in front of everyone around there. David, unwillingly, took out the rose and said, "All I have with me is this. If you are going to accept it, you can. It's not an ordinary one. It's a magical rose." David explained to the shopkeeper everything about the rose. After listening all these, Steve laughed at David, pointing towards the rose. "How can a rose make people rich?" Steve accepted the rose as he was not having any other alternatives. David said, "It's not just a rose. Truly, it's my life's 1 month. It's 1 month happiness to that I am giving you." David, with a heavy heart, moved towards his apartment and Steve went into his store with the rose. He thought for a while, "How can a rose make me rich? It's all my fault. I should not have been so gentle with him yesterday. He made me fool." Thinking this, he flinged the rose on the street in front of the store. As the rose touched the harsh road's surface, it started to rain heavily as yesterday, END.